The sky had already turned a deep navy blue when Patricia Taylor, Keanu Reeves' mother, spotted the glowing sign of a gas station up ahead. Her gas light had been blinking for the last 10 miles, and she felt a wave of relief wash over her. It had been a long day at work. As a talented costume designer, Patricia had spent nearly 14 hours on set, making last-minute adjustments to outfits for tomorrow's shoot. Her fingers were sore from sewing, and her eyes felt heavy with exhaustion. The gas station stood alone on the quiet stretch of highway, surrounded by nothing but tall pine trees and darkness. Patricia pulled her silver sedan up to the pump and turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt strange after driving with the radio on for so long. She checked her watch, almost 11:30 p.m. Through her windshield, she could see the convenience store attached to the gas station. The harsh fluorescent lights inside cast an eerie glow, making the place look like it was floating in the darkness. A single employee could be seen behind the counter, an older man with gray hair reading something on the counter. Patricia stepped out of her car and shivered. The night had grown colder than she expected. As she reached for the gas pump, she heard the rumble of motorcycles. Moments later, 5 bikes pulled into the station, their headlights briefly blinding her as they circled around and parked near the store entrance. The riders dismounted, 5 young men in their 20s, wearing leather jackets with various patches and symbols Patricia didn't recognize. They were loud, laughing and shoving each other playfully as they entered the store. Something about their energy made Patricia's stomach tighten. She'd worked around all types in the film industry and had developed a good sense for when something felt off. She tried to focus on filling her tank, keeping her head down while watching them from the corner of her eye. Through the store windows, she could see them grabbing drinks and snacks, talking animatedly. One of them, a tall guy with a red bandana tied around his neck, kept looking in her direction. "Just get your gas and go," Patricia whispered to herself. "Don't make eye contact." The pump clicked, indicating her tank was full. Patricia quickly replaced the nozzle and screwed her gas cap back on. As she turned to get back into her car, she realized the group had emerged from the store and was now standing between her and her driver's side door. "Nice car," said the one with the red bandana, taking a swig from his energy drink. "Bit fancy for these parts." Patricia clutched her keys tightly in her hand. The small pepper spray keychain that Keanu had insisted she carry suddenly felt very important. She forced a polite smile, the kind she perfected over years of working with difficult directors. "Thank you," she said simply, trying to keep her voice steady. "If you'll excuse me, I need to get going." But instead of moving aside, the young man took a step closer. The others formed a loose half-circle around her, their expressions a mix of amusement and something darker that made Patricia's heart beat faster. In that moment, she realized this late-night stop might turn into something she would regret. "I'm just leaving," Patricia said again, her voice firmer this time. She took a step toward her car door, but the young man with the red bandana shifted slightly, blocking her path. "What's the rush?" he asked. His breath smelled of energy drink and cigarettes. "We're just being friendly. Don't get many interesting people stopping here." The oldest of the group, a stocky guy with a short beard, laughed. "Yeah, mostly truckers and locals." His eyes scanned her car, lingering on the small production company sticker on her rear window. "You in movies or something?" Patricia felt her throat tighten. She'd dealt with difficult people before, but always in professional settings where there were rules and consequences. Out here, miles from anywhere, the normal social protections felt very far away. "I'm just a working person trying to get home," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "Like most people at this hour." One of the others, a lanky young man with a faded blue jacket, nudged his friend. "Bet she's got money though. Look at those shoes." He pointed at Patricia's leather boots, nothing fancy, just comfortable work shoes she'd had for years. Patricia realized she needed to change tactics. Getting defensive would only make things worse. She relaxed her shoulders and managed a tired smile. "Actually, I'm dead on my feet. Been working since 5 this morning," she said, deliberately casual. "I'm a costume designer. Mostly I just sew and fix clothes all day." For a moment, this seemed to work. Their postures relaxed slightly, the aggressive energy shifting to curiosity. But then the one with the red bandana snapped his fingers, his eyes widening. "Wait a minute. I've seen you somewhere before." He pulled out his phone and started searching something. "You look familiar." The older gas station attendant had appeared in the doorway of the convenience store. He was watching them but hadn't intervened. Patricia caught his eye, trying to silently communicate that she could use some help. He disappeared back inside. Great, Patricia thought, so much for that. Got it. Red Bandana suddenly exclaimed, holding up his phone. "You're Patricia Taylor, right? Keanu Reeves' mom." The atmosphere changed instantly. 5 pairs of eyes locked onto her with new interest. Patricia felt her stomach drop. Being recognized was the last thing she needed right now. "No way," said the bearded one, leaning in for a closer look. "For real? You've got to be kidding me," another one said. "The John Wick dude's mom? At our gas station." They'd pressed closer, their earlier intimidation tactics forgotten as they'd fired questions at her. "Is he cool in real life? Can you get us his autograph? Does he really know all that kung fu stuff? Can you call him right now?" Patricia raised her hands. "Gentlemen, please. It's late, I'm tired, and I really need to get home." "Just one selfie," Red Bandana insisted, moving even closer, holding up his phone. "My friends will never believe this." I said no. Patricia's voice was steel now. "Please step back." The mood shifted again. Red Bandana's smile faded, replacing excitement with something harder. "Come on, lady. One picture. It's not a big deal." He reached for her arm. Patricia's heart pounded in her chest as she realized the situation was spiraling beyond her control. Patricia took a quick step backward, putting distance between herself and Red Bandana's outstretched hand. The pepper spray keychain was now gripped firmly between her fingers, but she kept it hidden in her palm. The last thing she wanted was to escalate the situation. "Listen," she said, speaking clearly despite her racing heart. "I appreciate that you're fans of my son, but I need you to respect my personal space and privacy." The one with the blue jacket laughed. We've got a celebrity here, boys. Too good to take a picture with regular folks." "That's not what I said," Patricia replied, frustration creeping into her voice. "It's about basic respect. Would you want strangers cornering your mother at a gas station at midnight?" This caused a moment of uncomfortable silence. One of the guys, younger than the others with shaggy brown hair, shifted his weight and looked down. But Red Bandana wasn't backing down. "It's just a picture," he insisted, his tone hardening. "What's the big deal? You think you're too important for us?" The bearded one stepped closer. "Maybe we should call her son, see if he wants to come pick her up." He grinned at his friends. "I'd love to meet John Wick in person." Patricia felt a chill run down her spine. These young men clearly didn't understand boundaries, and the situation was getting more unpredictable by the second. She glanced toward the store again, but there was no sign of the attendant. "My son is currently filming in another country," she lied smoothly. "And I've already pressed the emergency button on my phone." Another lie, but she needed something to make them reconsider. Red Bandana's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, right, you're just being difficult." He reached for her again, this time grabbing her wrist. Patricia reacted instinctively, twisting her arm out of his grip with a sharp motion, a basic self-defense move Keanu had shown her years ago. The sudden movement surprised him, making him stumble slightly. "Don't touch me," Patricia said, her voice low but intense. "Not ever." The atmosphere had changed completely now. What had started as harassment had crossed into something more threatening. The circle of young men had tightened around her, and Patricia could see anger replacing the earlier excitement in their eyes. Her car was still blocked, and the store might as well have been miles away. "You think you're better than us," Blue Jacket sneered, "just because your son's famous." "I never said that," Patricia replied, trying to keep her voice calm even as adrenaline coursed through her body. "I just want to go home, same as anyone would." "Well, maybe we're not done talking yet," Red Bandana said, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone. "Maybe we want to hear some stories about your famous son first." Patricia felt her back touch her car. She was running out of space to retreat. The pepper spray was now in position, her thumb on the button, but she hesitated. There were 5 of them. If she sprayed one, what would the others do? Just as the tension reached its breaking point, a sharp, commanding voice cut through the night air. "That's quite enough, gentlemen." All heads turned toward the source of the voice. The gas station attendant was walking toward them, but he wasn't alone. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a security uniform walked beside him. In the store's doorway, a second security guard stood watching, hand resting casually on his belt. Patricia felt a wave of relief so intense her knees nearly buckled. The gas station wasn't as isolated as she'd thought. The security guard stopped a few feet away, his presence alone changing the dynamic of the situation. He was an older man, maybe in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who'd seen plenty in his lifetime. "Everything all right over here?" he asked, though his tone made it clear he already knew the answer. Red Bandana straightened up, suddenly trying to look casual. "We're just talking to the lady. No problem here." The guard's eyes moved slowly across each of the young men before settling on Patricia. "Ma'am? Are these gentlemen bothering you?" Before Patricia could answer, the gas station attendant stepped forward. He was shorter than the security guard, but carried himself with quiet confidence. His name tag read Frank. "I've been watching on the cameras," Frank said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Saw these boys surrounding the lady. Didn't look like a friendly conversation to me." The younger guy with shaggy hair started backing away slightly. "We were just excited. She's Keanu Reeves' mom." Frank's expression didn't change. "Don't care if she's the Queen of England. That's not how we treat customers here." Patricia found her voice again. "I was just trying to leave, and they wouldn't let me get to my car." The security guard nodded slowly. "I see." He turned to the group. "This is private property, gentlemen. The owner pays us to make sure it stays safe for all customers. Right now, you're making it unsafe." Blue Jacket scoffed. "We didn't do anything wrong." Surrounding a woman alone at night and refusing to let her leave. The guard raised an eyebrow. "That's harassment at minimum. Could be considered something worse." The second security guard had moved closer now, standing at the edge of the scene. Patricia noticed he was holding a radio in his hand. The sight of it seemed to register with the group as well. Red Bandana's confidence was visibly fading. "Look, we were just excited to meet someone connected to a celebrity. We didn't mean any harm." "Intentions don't matter much when someone feels threatened," Frank said flatly. "And the highway patrol stops by here regularly. Officer Reynolds was just here 20 minutes ago. He'll be back through on his return route any time now." Patricia wasn't sure if Frank was telling the truth about the patrol officer, but the mention had an immediate effect. The young men exchanged glances, their earlier bravado draining away. The bearded one spoke up. "We don't want any trouble with the cops." "Smart thinking," the security guard said. "So here's what's going to happen. You boys are going to get on your bikes and leave. The lady is going to drive away safely. And we're all going to forget this happened. Assuming it doesn't happen again." There was a moment of tension as Red Bandana seemed to consider arguing, but a look from the bearded one silenced whatever he was about to say. "Fine," Red Bandana muttered. "We're leaving anyway." The group began to move toward their motorcycles, but the security guard called after them. "One more thing." They paused and looked back. "The cameras got clear shots of all your faces and your license plates, just so you know." This final comment seemed to hurry them along. Within moments, they were starting their bikes, the engines roaring in the quiet night. Frank turned to Patricia. "Let me walk you to your car, ma'am. I'm sorry about what happened." As they walked the short distance to her driver's side door, Patricia felt her hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline. "Thank you for stepping in, both of you." The security guard nodded. No decent person stands by when someone needs help. Frank unlocked her car door with a gentle smile. "Would you like us to follow you to the highway? Make sure those boys don't get any ideas about following you." Patricia watched in her rearview mirror as the security guard's vehicle followed her to the highway entrance. The gang of young men had already disappeared into the night, their motorcycle headlights fading in the opposite direction. Once she merged onto the well-lit highway, the security car flashed its lights twice in farewell before turning around. "Thank goodness," Patricia whispered to herself, finally letting out the breath she felt like she'd been holding for hours. Her hands were still trembling slightly on the steering wheel. She checked the time. It was nearly midnight now. She drove in silence for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. The fear was still fresh, a cold feeling in the pit of her stomach. But now anger was starting to replace it. Why should any woman have to feel afraid just because she needed to get gas? Why should anyone feel entitled to her time and space just because they recognized her name? Lost in these thoughts, she almost missed the flash of headlights behind her. Motorcycle headlights. No, she muttered, her heart rate immediately spiking. They wouldn't. But they had. 2 motorcycles were gaining on her quickly from behind. In the darkness, she couldn't tell which of the young men they were, but it hardly mattered. They were following her, and that was bad enough. Patricia grabbed her phone from the cup holder, ready to call 911, when she remembered she hadn't actually pressed the emergency button earlier. That had been a bluff, but now she needed it for real. Just as her finger hovered over the emergency call button, her phone rang, startling her so badly she nearly dropped it. The caller ID showed Keanu. The timing was so unexpected she almost laughed despite her fear. She answered on speaker. "Keanu? Hi, honey." "Hey, Mom," her son's familiar voice came through. "I know it's late, but I just wrapped filming and wanted to check in. You okay? You sound strange." Patricia hesitated. The motorcycles were still behind her, keeping pace. She didn't want to worry her son, but she also didn't want to lie. "Actually, I'm having a bit of a situation," she said carefully, keeping her eyes on the road. "I stopped for gas, and some young men recognized me as your mother. They weren't very polite about it, and now 2 of them seem to be following me on motorcycles." There was a brief silence on the other end. When Keanu spoke again, his voice was calm but serious. "Aren't you on a main road?" "Yes, Highway 14. "Good. Is there anywhere public you can pull over? A restaurant or another gas station with people around?" Patricia scanned the road ahead and spotted a brightly lit truck stop about half a mile ahead. "Yes, there's a truck stop coming up." "Perfect. Pull in there where there are people and lights. Don't get out of your car. And Mom? Press the red button on your phone case." Patricia had forgotten all about the special phone case Keanu had given her last Christmas. It looked like a normal protective case, but it had a discreet button that, when pressed, would send her exact location to both Keanu and local emergency services. "I will," she promised, already feeling calmer with a plan in place. As she approached the truck stop, she signaled and began to slow down. To her surprise, the motorcycles didn't follow her exit. Instead, they sped up, roaring past her car and continuing down the highway. Patricia pulled into the truck stop anyway, parking near the entrance where several truck drivers were walking in and out of the brightly lit store. She pressed the red button on her phone case just to be safe. "They drove past," she told Keanu. "I think they were just trying to scare me." "Or they saw you on the phone and got nervous," Keanu replied. "Either way, stay there for a few minutes. The alert from your phone will bring a patrol car to check on you." Sure enough, barely 5 minutes later, a highway patrol car pulled into the truck stop, its lights flashing. The officer approached her window cautiously. The patrol officer, a woman with short blonde hair tucked beneath her cap, approached Patricia's window with a flashlight held low. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Wilson with Highway Patrol. We received an alert from this location. Are you Patricia Taylor?" Her voice was professional but kind. Patricia nodded, rolling her window down further. "Yes, that's me. My son gave me this phone case with an emergency button. I pressed it after some men followed me from a gas station." Officer Wilson's posture relaxed slightly, but her eyes remained alert as she scanned the parking lot. "Can you tell me what happened?" As Patricia recounted the events at the gas station and the motorcycles following her afterward, she was surprised by how steady her voice remained. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a simmering anger. "They were on 2 motorcycles, heading north on Highway 14, she finished. "I couldn't see their faces with the helmets, but I'm certain they were from the same group." Officer Wilson nodded, writing notes in a small pad. "And you said this began at Riverside Gas about 15 miles south of here?" "Yes, that's right." The officer touched the radio on her shoulder. "Unit 47 to dispatch. Need to put out a BOO for 2 motorcyclists heading northbound on Highway 14 from mile marker 32, suspected harassment. We'll send the details." She paused, listening to the response before continuing. "Also, check if we've had any calls from Riverside Gas Station in the last half hour." As the radio crackled with responses, Patricia realized Keanu was still on the line, silent but listening. She picked up the phone. Keanu, I'm with the highway patrol now. I'm safe. I'm glad. His voice came through, relieved but still concerned. Do you want me to stay on the line? Before she could answer, Officer Wilson's radio squawked loudly. The officer's expression changed as she listened to the message coming through. Ma'am, she said to Patricia, apparently we already have those motorcyclists in custody. A unit spotted them speeding just north of here and pulled them over. When they ran their IDs, they found that one has an outstanding warrant for a previous assault charge. Patricia felt a wave of relief wash over her. They've been caught already. Officer Wilson nodded. Highway 14 isn't exactly teeming with motorcycles at midnight on a Tuesday. And here's something interesting. Riverside Gas also called in about 20 minutes ago to report a harassment incident involving the same individuals. The station manager specifically mentioned a woman being surrounded by a group of motorcyclists. That would be Frank, Patricia said. He and the security guards helped me get away. Officer Wilson smiled slightly. Good man. Now, I hate to ask this, but would you be willing to come to the station to make a formal statement? The young men are claiming they were just being friendly fans. Your testimony would help establish a pattern of harassment. Patricia hesitated. It was late and she was exhausted. Part of her just wanted to go home and forget the whole thing. But then she remembered the fear she'd felt, trapped against her car with nowhere to go. How many other women had these men intimidated? How many didn't have security guards or famous sons to help them? Keanu, she said into the phone, I'm going to go to the police station to make a statement. I'll call you after. Do you want me to come down there? He asked immediately. Patricia smiled, touched by his concern, but knowing how exhausted he must be after filming. No need, honey. I'm fine, really. After ending the call, she turned to Officer Wilson. I'll follow you to the station. 20 minutes later, Patricia sat in a brightly lit interview room, a cup of station coffee warming her hands as she gave her statement to Officer Wilson and her partner. They recorded every detail, from the initial confrontation to the motorcycles following her. You said they recognized you as Keanu Reeves' mother, the male officer asked. Did you think that's why they targeted you specifically? Patricia considered this. Initially, no. They approached before they recognized me. But once they knew who I was, they became more insistent, more entitled. Like knowing a famous person somehow made me public property. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the gas station. Patricia sat in her living room, sipping tea and reading through emails on her laptop when her doorbell rang. Outside stood her son, carrying a small duffel bag and wearing the quiet smile she knew so well. Keanu, I thought you were still filming in Montreal, she exclaimed, embracing him. Wrapped early, he said, following her inside. Thought I'd surprise you. They settled in the kitchen, where Patricia made fresh coffee. Though she tried to keep the conversation light, she could tell her son had something on his mind. Mom, he finally said, I've been thinking a lot about what happened at that gas station. Patricia waved her hand dismissively. It's over now. Those young men are facing consequences for their actions. The one with the red bandana, the ringleader, apparently had 2 other harassment complaints against him already. Keanu nodded, his eyes serious. I know. Officer Wilson called to update me last week. She called you? Patricia raised an eyebrow. I might have asked her to keep me informed, he admitted. I was worried about you. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. I'm fine, really. It was frightening at the moment, but I handled it. That's just it, Keanu said. You handled it perfectly. The officers told me how calm and collected you were, how you remembered details that helped them build their case. But it should never have happened in the first place. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Patricia had raised Keanu to be thoughtful and empathetic, and she could see him processing everything. I brought you something, he said finally, reaching for his duffel bag. He pulled out a small box and slid it across the table. Inside was a sleek smartwatch. Patricia looked at it questioningly. It has an emergency feature, more reliable than the phone case, Keanu explained. But that's not all. He reached into the bag again and pulled out a brochure. There's a women's self-defense class starting next week at the community center. The instructor is an old friend of mine from movie training. Patricia started to protest, but stopped herself. For years, she'd declined similar offers, insisting she was fine on her own. But the gas station incident had been a stark reminder that sometimes, despite your best efforts, situations could spiral beyond your control. "I'll try it," she said, surprising both herself and her son. Later that afternoon, they walked through the park near Patricia's home. The spring air was warm, and families were out enjoying the sunshine. It felt worlds away from that dark night at the gas station. "You know what bothered me most about those young men?" Patricia said suddenly. "It wasn't the fear. It was how they seemed to think they were entitled to my time and attention simply because they recognized my name. Like being connected to someone famous made me somehow less deserving of basic respect." Keanu nodded slowly. "Fame creates a strange illusion of familiarity. People think they know you, or in your case, think they have a right to access you. It's something I've struggled with too. The difference is you chose this life," Patricia pointed out. "I'm just your mother. And an accomplished costume designer in your own right," Keanu added with a smile. "Don't forget that part." They stopped to watch a group of children flying kites, their laughter carrying on the breeze. "I spoke with Frank yesterday," Patricia said. "The gas station attendant. Just called to thank him again for his help. He told me those young men aren't welcome at his station anymore. His boss reviewed the security footage and fully supported his decision." "Small justice," Keanu remarked. "But justice nonetheless," Patricia replied. "And maybe a lesson learned. Actions have consequences, whether you regret them or not." As they continued their walk, Patricia felt a sense of peace settling over her. The incident had been frightening, yes, but it had also shown her the kindness of strangers like Frank, the professionalism of officers like Wilson, and the unwavering support of her son. For every person who failed to show basic decency, there were many more who stepped up when it mattered. And that, she thought, was worth remembering.